What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Mid-Level Media channel, your hub for everything physical media and entertainment. And today, guys, I am here to talk about Dead Silence on 4K. This is one of Scream Factory's latest 4K releases. They also released, guys, The Exorcist 3 on 4K this week, which I'm really excited to check out as well. Don't know if I'll get a review out for this one because I've got so much stuff. My desk, guys, is surrounded by new physical media releases that I've been getting in the mail, which is a hell of a great problem to have in this day and age, but I've got tons of work to do. But we're going to talk about Dead Silence today. Before we get into it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. We talk about physical media on this channel. If you haven't guessed it yet, we talk about Blu-rays and 4Ks and movies and owning the movies that you love, all that stuff there behind me. You see, guys, I kind of changed my backdrop a little bit, got a little bit of a different setup there. If you're new to the channel, you probably wouldn't notice. You know, drop me a comment down below. What's your thoughts on Dead Silence? Is this one of your favorite James Wan movies? I will say that I feel like this movie is a little underrated. It's a little underrated and a little under talked about. So I hope that more people check this out through this Scream Factory release, because this was one that I watched back in 2007 and I didn't love it. I didn't love it back in 2007 because I was expecting something else, and I didn't watch it again until the Scream Factory release. So I'm excited to talk about this one for the first time since 2007. So let's get into talking about this release, guys. Dead Silence on 4K. I'm going to talk about the movie itself for a little bit, then we'll move into the audiovisual quality, the special features, the packaging. I do have one issue with the packaging, but this movie itself, like I said, came out in 2007. This is directed by James Wan, who did the movie Saw back in 2004 and has since done movies like Insidious, the Conjuring movies. Like, this guy is a franchise starter. Like, that is what he does. That is what he's built his career on. He built the entire Saw franchise from the first movie. Now, he only directed the first movie, and then the 8 sequels were directed by other people. Now there's a 10th one coming. So he is responsible for a 10-movie franchise. Then, of course, the Insidious movies, which is getting ready to get its 5th film in that franchise. Then the Conjuring movies, like the first 2 Conjuring movies were directed by him, as were the first 2 Insidious movies. And then the entire Conjureverse is like spawned from his brain. And not just his brain, but also Leigh Whannell, which is his kind of partner in crime, especially in the earlier stuff. So Leigh Whannell, I think I'm saying that right. Leigh Whannell, I'll say Leigh Whannell. I think that's his name. Leigh Whannell and James Wan are actually partners. And Leigh Whannell mostly would write the scripts, and James Wan would also be responsible for the story as well. But Leigh Whannell really would write the scripts. James Wan would direct the movies, and they kind of had this cool partnership going for a long time until Leigh Whannell actually broke out and started doing his own writing and directing himself. So they did this movie together, and this was their follow-up to Saw. And what I will say is, going back and watching this, I did not really enjoy it the first time because I thought more or less this was going to be, I was such a big Goosebumps fan when I was a kid, guys. I loved the Night of the Living Dummy books. I thought this was going to be like a Night of the Living Dummy, but a more mature version. And the truth of it is this is not really a killer doll movie. This is not a like Chucky type movie. It's more like Annabelle, which of course is James Wan again, later on the Conjuring movies. It's a doll that has a ghostly presence. There's something following this doll around. There's something attached to this doll. So this is more of like a haunted house, like ghost story type movie, like Insidious, like Conjuring. And the really cool thing about going back and watching this now, just knowing what James Wan would go on to do with his career, is you can really see that this movie was kind of a bridge between Saw, between what he did in Saw, and also like what he would go on to do in Insidious and the Conjuring movies. Like, this feels like the stopgap between the two of those, because he didn't want to be known as a torture guy after Saw. So he wanted to go off and try a ghost story. So that's what he was going for with this movie. But just in terms of direction and certain like editing choices that they do in this movie, it really will remind you of some of the moments in Saw. In particular, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a reveal at the end of this film that is very reminiscent of the reveals of not just the first Saw movie, but like all the Saw movies. Like, there's always a reveal at the end of the Saw movies. There's a very similar reveal at the end of this one, and it's even edited like the exact same way. So that's kind of the Saw comparison, where that comes from. But then you can just see like all of the origins of what he would go on to do with Insidious and The Conjuring, just in terms of how he presents this film and how he kind of builds the atmosphere, how he holds the camera, how he lingers on certain shots, what he does with sound in this movie Again, very reminiscent of what he would go on to do with Insidious and The Conjuring. So you can really see the groundwork and the origins of what James Wan would become as a horror film director later on in his career with Dead Silence. So I think that's super cool. Getting into the movie itself, the movie itself is pretty good. I actually enjoyed this one quite a bit. It's creepy. It has a lot of creepy imagery. Like that puppet, the thing I'll say about this puppet, in comparison to Annabelle, some people will call Annabelle a killer doll movie. To me, it's not a killer doll movie. It's a doll that has a ghostly presence attached to it. It doesn't ever animate. It doesn't go around and kill people like Chucky does. But the thing I'll say about this doll is it has a ghostly presence attached to it as well, the character of Mary Shaw, which there's a whole backstory and legend and mythology that they introduce in this movie attached to that, which I also think is super cool. But the puppet in this movie actually doesn't fully animate. Well, there's actually one scene where he kind of does. But he moves his eyes around at least. He at least showcases this creepy presence throughout the movie. And I love the way that they have the eyes move. Like he's given like side eye like several points to this movie. But it's creepy. But just the like ghostly presence of Mary Shaw, the character, like that's very creepy. Like I have an irrational fear of old ladies. And again, James Wan would take that, the old lady like imagery from this movie, the creepy old lady imagery, he would go on to take with him to the Insidious movies. Like there's several like characters in those movies that are very reminiscent of Mary Shaw in this film. So I think that all those connections that you can draw from this movie and you can just kind of draw the maps and the comparisons to like every other film in James Wan's like horror universe. And I think that's really cool because I think that this movie is unique in that aspect because he would go on to do Death Sentence, which is more or less like a Death Wish kind of remake in a sense. So that was kind of a completely different animal. But you can just draw like there's such a clear path between Saw, Dead Silence, Insidious, and The Conjuring. There's such a like clear progression, and this is more or less like right in the middle of everything. And you can just see all the other movies branching off from this film, and I think that's super cool. Again, getting back to the movie itself, it's creepy, it's atmospheric. There's a moment like the moment at the beginning with him and his wife or his girlfriend at the apartment. When he sucks all that sound out of that room and when he slows everything down, like that's an incredibly well done moment. And you can just see that a horror filmmaker on the cusp of becoming a master of the genre, like in that moment. Again, I don't think the entire film is up to the standards that he would later set for himself, but there's certain moments in this movie, like that moment in the beginning, where you can just see, okay, this is a guy that clearly knows what he is doing in this genre and is just going to be firing on all cylinders in a few years. So, and again, it's stuff that I didn't notice back when I watched this back in 2007. I didn't even know who James Wan was. I don't even think I knew that this was the same guy that did Saw back when I watched this film. But I do think it's a very well done and well directed film, and I think it does have a lot of creep factor to it. I think it does bring the scare, so it is effective in that aspect. So I'll give this, as a movie, I'll give this a 3.5 out of 5. I did enjoy my rewatch of this one quite a bit. Now getting into the actual 4K transfer here. So this is a new 4K master. Now this is an upscaled 4K. This is not a native 4K transfer. It does have HDR and HDR10, and I thought it looked really good. Like I thought Screen Factory did a good job. It's not the best work that they've ever done, but I thought it was a really solid 4K transfer. Now one thing I'll say about this movie, it is very gloomy. It's very pale. Like James Wan back in those days just kind of used that aesthetic. There's not a lot of colors in this movie that really pop off. There are some deep reds in certain sequences, like when they first discover that puppet inside the case, you see the red velvet on the back of the case or the interior of the case, and that in contrast to the actual puppet inside the case, that stuff looks beautiful. There's several scenes like that where the color is showcased in that way in comparison to like this very gloomy and almost black and white background, and it does look really beautiful when they do that. But the black levels are really excellent here. Like they really showcase that contrast. Like I said, it's almost, I don't want to say it's like it's black and white, but it's so pale, the colors are so muted that when you're watching it, it kind of reminds you of watching a black and white movie in 4K, which I'm super high on. Like I love black and white movies in 4K. I think that almost showcases 4K the best in the HDR just because of those contrasts between the blacks and the whites. It's not completely like that here, but it's kind of reminiscent of that. So I thought that overall it was a very beautiful 4K transfer. Now, I have not seen this movie on Blu-ray, so I don't have that comparison to draw from. The last time I saw it was on DVD, and it certainly looks better than a DVD. So overall, I would say this is a very good 4K transfer. It's not one of Scream Factory's best for sure, but I do think it's a nice, crisp, clean 4K transfer. And if you've owned this movie on Blu-ray or DVD, I think it would be a pretty good upgrade and replacement to both of those formats. Now, getting into the audio, this does use a DTS HD Master Audio 5.1, so no upgrade to Atmos here, but I thought that everything sounded great. I don't really think this is a movie that necessarily needs Atmos. There is some great sound design, like I said in the beginning, when all that sound is sucked out of the room, like all that stuff sounded wonderful. And there's a lot of good, I don't want to say jump scares, but a lot of moments where they're really trying to ratchet up the tension by using sound, and all that stuff sounds spectacular. So getting into the special features here, there are a couple of good, wonderful special features with Leigh Whannell and James Wan that both came back to do 12 to 15 minute interviews. And they're spectacular interviews, just talking about the beginnings of their career, how they work together, how well they work together, the fact that they are friends, and how they kind of came up with these ideas for these movies. And James Wan really gets into how after Saw, he didn't want to be known for the torture stuff. He didn't want to become the torture guy, and he kind of felt himself going that way. So that's why he didn't go and direct Saw 2 and Saw 3. And he wanted to start telling ghost stories. So that's what he wanted to do with Dead Silence. So they're both great interviews, and I'm so impressed that Scream Factory got James Wan and Leigh Whannell, because I imagine both of those guys are like super busy at this point. I think Leigh Whannell's working on his next movie, and James Wan is like always developing something. I imagine that both of them are just so busy, but the fact that they came in to talk about this movie, you can just tell they both probably have a real passion for this movie, and they're really proud of it. And I feel like for both of them, this marks a real bright spot, a real happy time in both of their careers. So that's why they were willing to come back and talk about this movie. And they're both great interviews. There's also an interview with the guy that did the puppeteering for the doll in this movie, which is pretty cool. So just some great interviews here. There's all the archival stuff is here as well. There's alternate opening and ending, deleted scenes, the making of Dead Silence, Mary Shaw's secrets, evolution of visual effects, and a theatrical trailer. So this is full of special features. Scream Factory, look, they get some criticism sometimes for not including new special features, in particular on their 4K upgrades, but this is new to Scream Factory, and they really went all out with these special features. This is probably one of the best special features wise Scream Factory release that I have seen in quite some time. So highly recommend it for that. It is interesting that on the back of this right here, which I'll get into the packaging here in a second, they only include the interview with Leigh Whannell. I've noticed that with Scream Factory, they'll like leave out certain like special features on the back, and I don't know why they do that. I would think that you would want, if anybody, you're going to put one person on the back, you would at least put the director of the movie, James Wan, and not Leigh Whannell. So it just feels like kind of a weird thing that Scream Factory did. But getting into the packaging, this is some really cool packaging. I imagine this is the original poster art, and maybe this is new artwork. Now, there is newly commissioned artwork, but it is exclusive to the Scream Factory website, so you'll have to get on there to check that out. But besides that, I think this is really good artwork right here. I do like just the ventriloquist dummy on the cover. I think it looks super creepy and really encapsulates what this film is. Then you got the actual, you know, logo of the film on the bottom. You have the 4K Ultra HD up the top. This is a collector's edition. I'll show you the spine real quick right there. Then we'll look at the back. You have the synopsis, you have the special features, the casting list, all the specs and stuff at the bottom. And then we'll go ahead and take it out of the case. And I'll get into my one complaint. So sometimes with some releases, they'll use this like tight plastic wrap around their releases. And Scream Factory doesn't usually do that. And I'll pull out my Exorcist real quick, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So the Exorcist has this, you know, this type of plastic right here that's kind of loose fitting. It's still tight around it, but it's kind of loose fitting, and you guys know what I'm talking about. It kind of folds at the top and you rip it off. There's just a very particular way of taking off this type of plastic wrap versus the other one. The other one's kind of like this almost shrink wrap type stuff that's kind of wrapped around it, and you can just pull at it to yank it off. So when they do that, it really just wrinkles up that actual like 4K case. So I don't know why they did that for this particular release, but it's annoying because it kind of just ruffles. I could probably take this out, put it in a new, but I have to get a new 4K case, and that's just a hassle, guys. I'd rather not do that, but I'll show you the back right there. kind of zoom up and down it real quick, but that's my only gripe. Just don't use the shrink wrap stuff on your stuff. That's some stuff that the freaking Dollar Tree or Walmart would do on their $1 or $2 Blu-ray releases. Don't do that to your stuff, Scream Factory. Put some actual like fitted plastic on your releases. Don't use that shrink wrap stuff. So, but look, it's nice. This is a 2-disc set as well. I almost forgot to show off the disc. This is a 2-disc set. You do get a 4K with a theatrical cut. And on the Blu-ray, you have all the special features, but you do have the theatrical cut and the unrated cut of the film on Blu-ray. So I didn't get a chance to watch the unrated cut. I'm not exactly sure what the differences are there, but both cuts are available in the set. But only the theatrical is on 4K. The director's unrated cut is not on 4K. So I know there's going to be some people that probably have problems with that. But that's my review of Dead Silence right now, guys. This is going for $29.99. So it's a pretty penny to get this one. It's a premium price to get Dead Silence on 4K. But I would say, guys, at the end of the day, if you're a fan of James Wan, if you're a fan of this movie in particular, I do recommend that you own this. I think that the 4K transfer is really good. I think that sound-wise, it's really good. And there's tons of great new special features here to enjoy. So I would recommend this release at the end of the day. Maybe wait a couple of weeks. It might drop down a couple of bucks. But at the end of the day, I do recommend Dead Silence on 4K. I think it's a really good release from Scream Factory. So thank y'all so much for watching my review of Dead Silence on 4K. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Turn on those bell notifications and follow me on all my social media accounts down below. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Letterboxd. I'm on TikTok, for crying out loud. Follow me down below in the description, and we'll see you next time.